Hello, everyone. Welcome to ANCAP Radio. We are really looking forward to today's conversation with Dave Henderson and you, the audience, as we get ready to map out and revamp the future of ANCAP Radio. Looking forward to an exciting 2024. I know it's kind of crazy to be talking about 2024 already, but we are, about a quarter away from it. So if you're tuned in again for the first time, make sure you give ANCAP Radio a follow. Myself, Dave, retweet the space. Like the space. We want to get the message of anarcho-capitalist philosophy out there to the masses. So, on the note of everything here, Dave, looking forward to talking about the future of what we're building. But just on a personal level, how are you doing today? What's the weather like in New Zealand? What's Dave Henderson got on his mind today?
Looks like it's going to be a gorgeous spring day for us. So that's quite something. So, but good morning. And you?
That's right, spring. Yeah, I mean, I'm gearing up for fall, but you're on the other other side of the globe.
I am coming out of winter, and you're in Florida.
That's right. That's right.
Having weathered the hurricane.
We did just weather a hurricane. That was my first time having to go through anything like that, which is pretty interesting. I've lived on the East Coast of the U.S. before and dealt with some hurricane rain, but to actually have to evacuate, and that's the funny thing too, is you just never know. We look back on it, we probably didn't need to evacuate, but whatever. We're rookies down here, right? So we did, and it turned into a nice little adventure.
Well done. Well, we don't have anything like hurricanes here, Adam, so that's one of the upsides of living in New Zealand, I guess. There is a few downsides too.
It is one of the windiest places on the planet, though, right?
New Zealand.
I've heard that or at least one of the cities there.
Oh, well, our capital city, Wellington, gets wind, but I mean, it's an island nation, so it does get a lot of wind like any island does. It doesn't have that continental climate that America is sensational for. But it has its political upsides and downsides, as we've discussed, Adam. Every place on the planet has its benefits and its negatives. And New Zealand is right down the bottom of the world, which is one of the reasons.
How are the people of New Zealand preparing for the rumors that we keep hearing? And that's almost the part. I almost don't even want to ask the question, because sometimes I think all the stuff we're hearing about new variants and all that, it actually gets entertained by us paying attention to it in the first place. But I gotta ask,
that's right.
Do you think New Zealanders are gonna quote unquote fall for it again, or what are the people feeling like right now?
No, I don't think so. My view of our long march to dystopia is that it's not a straight line, and that we have events like we've just been through, but there is pushback. And so we've got an election coming up in October. So we're 4, maybe 5 weeks away from an election. So the election cycle is in full flight. And there is a big push right now towards dumping the current government, who's been in government for 6 years, a Labour government, dumping them and slightly embracing a more free market approach, which is excellent. And with that, there's a strong indication that people will not tolerate the nonsense that we went through, which was pretty draconian, is probably as bad as anywhere over the last 3 years. So that's a positive. But look, Adam, as we know, who knows? It's people have these collectivist aspirations in them fundamentally, and that's where we may end up. But funnily enough, there's a poll that came out earlier in the week. There is a Libertarian Party in New Zealand, or a party that has strong libertarian values. I know the folk there well, and they were polling at 18%. in this last poll. So, I mean, that's hilarious in many, many ways. It's unheard of. But it does indicate that people are enthusiastic about a decent amount of people are enthusiastic about embracing those policies. So anyway, so that's encouraging and positive. And if it comes to pass, well, then will produce some positive effects. But as we know, as we know, they will be short-lived. So,
Right. That's what I think of, and I know some of these topics came up on a space we did recently, which is,
yeah,
voting somebody into power that's different than the other ones. It's kind of
yeah,
impossible. Would you agree?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, and the problem is, the a political party will come to power on the promise of, new ideas and dealing with some of the draconian measures of the past, but the rollback, is never as far as it should be. So, but for a moment, there is some respite and there is some positivity, and there is a bit more regard for the values of freedom, which is where we come in, Adam, and our aspiration here to try and do something positive to promote those values. Just before we get into that, I was just going to talk about. I was watching this week that Netflix show called Painkillers. Have you seen that?
I have not, and I'm someone who, I try to stay away from anything that comes out of Hollywood. But when an ANCAP recommends something to me, I will go check it out. So
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Well, it was. I was interested in the story. Do you know the fundamental story? It's about Purdue Pharmacy, the Sackler family, etc., and OxyContin.
No, I do not know.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a wonderful example of just what a clusterfuck these things are. And of course the producers of the show are trying to make Sacklers the villain, which in many ways they deserve to be, and they are pointing out the horrors of OxyContin, which is an opioid and a painkiller. And yet, at the end of the day, it's a wonderful example that the state is the problem here as much as anything. And of course, that just gets completely glossed over. You have an entity, a drug company, producing this painkiller and marketing it as a painkiller, which is a highly addictive opioid. And of course, as you know, to get any drug on the market in the US, you have to go on your knees to the FDA, and you have to spend a fortune with them saying this is a cool drug and it'll do this and it's safe. Here's all the randomized tests that we've done. Here's all the results from it. You can see there's no problems here, and you've got to hope that the FDA will approve it. So there's problem number one. Problem number two is you've then got a whole medical establishment where it's populated by people who have gone to the right university that's state approved, and they've got they've completed a state approved course, and then they come out and they join a state approved medical body so that they can practice their craft. And I assume, because I don't know the US this well, Adam, but then the pharmacists in there have to be state approved as well, and would have to have gone through a state approved course. And then you have a company come along that manages, God knows how, to get this drug approved by the FDA. And as soon as it's approved by the FDA, everyone punches the air, and every doctor then nods wisely because it's been approved by the state, and the pharmacies are all happy, and the consumers think, oh, well, it's been approved by the state, therefore it must be fine. I mean, the end result is that OxyContin is highly addictive. It was prescribed described as a consequence of a highly aggressive marketing campaign that this company undertook to doctors. And then it's killing something like, I think last year it killed 63,000 people. 63,000 people died as a consequence of OxyContin overdoses or issues related to it. So it's a deadly, deadly drug in so many ways. But anyway, it just was causing me to reflect again, just of how often in these cases the state is the problem. The state then starts through a enthusiastic woman working at a DA's office, I think in Virginia, or West Virginia, it might have been, starts looking into this. They then start bringing some charges against the Purdue Pharmacy and the family for the problems with the drug. So having approved the drug, the state has approved the drug, then the state starts bringing charges against them, and then politically those charges, the DA comes under pressure, those charges get watered down, and a little bit of money's thrown around to sate some of the state employees who are trying to point out the horrors of the drug. And what's completely missed through all of this is individual responsibility.
Yeah. And okay, so you're bringing up a point that I wanted to go deeper on. Before that, also want to remind everyone, if you're just tuning in live or on the replay, be sure to hit the like button, the retweet button. Go ahead and give ANCAP Radio, Dave, myself a follow here on Twitter, or should we say X now, whatever your cup of tea is. We're going to open up the floor here soon, and I see we've got some longtime listeners tuned in as well. I see Seamus just tuned in. Cassius, I like options. I remember you. John Galt Society, Sandra, Eric, I see you're here. We are going to be interviewing you guys today, later on the show, just to get an idea of what are we doing that you like, what are we doing that you don't like, what would you like to see more of ANCAP Radio. We're here to serve you guys at the end of the day, so get ready for that, or we're happy to see you guys here. Dave, so places to my knowledge like Portland, Oregon, and Vancouver, British Columbia.
Yep.
To my knowledge, they've apparently legalized everything, and I do think in a perfect ANCAP society, you shouldn't need a government to tell you what you can or cannot put into your body at any point in time.
Sure.
But we also see scenarios, from my understanding, where everything has been legalized, and the certain homeless communities and areas where you can you can legally do whatever you want. It's a little bit of a nightmare. And then so also statists will go and say, like, hey, look, see what happens when you legalize everything? Like, it's terrible. So where's the disconnect there? Because I think in an ideal society, you would have people who are responsible enough to avoid, that type of environment.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what this whole philosophy turns on, isn't it, Adam? Is personal responsibility, and the type of society we're advocating, which, I mean, let's be frank about it. It's not even on the horizon, unfortunately, but that doesn't stop us idealizing it and talking about it and holding it up as a gold standard of what a society should look like. It's important to keep that view and that vision alive, which is one of the things we're trying to do here. But I mean, the cornerstone of it, the bedrock of it, is personal responsibility. And we've lived in societies for a long time, and if you take this current cycle, where the role of the state fundamentally, how politicians get their power, is by taking responsibility away from people, saying to them, don't sweat on that, don't worry about that, we're going to look after you, we're going to attend to this or that. And so, you've seen, if you take the whole drug issue, you and I completely agree that a person is free to put into their body and do with their body what they choose, and they must be. And if that means the destruction of their life, then that potential, that possibility has to exist. It's a reality, and we shouldn't ignore it. But we live in worlds now where the state says, this is wrong for you, and so we're going to make it illegal. I don't know firsthand, obviously, or possibly even have a decent view secondhand of those specific issues you're talking about. But the reality is that even in the quiet, peaceful little town I live in the South Island, New Zealand, at the bottom of the world, if I was to duck out now for 30 minutes, I bet you I could come back with certainly marijuana and probably cocaine, notwithstanding that they're both illegal in New Zealand, highly illegal in New Zealand, and supposedly the government works very hard to make sure that they're not available. They are available. They're ridiculously freely available, because the black market is more creative, more entrepreneurial than the state, and more clever than the state will ever be, and so it manages to transcend it. But if drugs were freely available, and this is the whole thing with the ANCAP philosophy, it requires a considerable amount of imagination to try and understand how different things would be if personal responsibility were the highest value in society. And for a start, parents would be treating their kids differently. Everyone I know in New Zealand, just about that with kids, and I can't say everyone, but a lot of the people I know in New Zealand with kids, turn a complete blind eye to the issues, the problems, the downsides of drugs, simply in respect to their kids, and dealing with it in respect to their kids, simply because of the fact, well, it's illegal. The government's looking after that end of it. It's not a problem. And so I have no doubt, like anything, is when you legalize something that has previously been highly prohibited, that, people then go nuts with it. In other words, the pendulum swings right the other way. And I mean, of course, that was the problem when we tried to create a prohibition around alcohol, wasn't it? That alcohol consumption didn't go down, but when it was legalized, people did run out of hand. And what's your experience with the Vancouver and Portland current situations?
Well, so I haven't been to Portland, and my wife and I were in Vancouver for Giants conference, which I guess I'll give him a proper shout out here too. If anyone here is not familiar with capitalism and morality, I would Google capitalism and morality 2023. It's in Vancouver, and it's this coming weekend. But anyways, we were there last year around this time, and I can't remember the name of and anyone here who's familiar with Vancouver, you would know, but there is a stretch. And I've seen Skid Row before too, but there's a stretch there in Vancouver that, at least from what I saw, puts Skid Row to shame. And it's just an entire homeless community. And you ask the people from Vancouver, why is this? How is this? What's the problem? And one thing that people will point to is, well, all drugs are now legal, or something. It's something along those lines in British Columbia and Vancouver. And, this is part of the reason. But I think your point is what makes the most sense, is having having it be illegal in the first place, and then having the pendulum swing back the other way. It's almost like the only way that you can avoid scenarios like that is to start something from scratch. Which is why, I think for years we've looked for something somewhat similar to Lieberland. That's the
Yeah,
only
yeah,
country it's the only country I can think of that's starting from scratch where maybe it's not too late, you know.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's my take.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's right, and I mean, it's a classic example. Is you see this in so many areas where the state has banished things, and then you sit there with in a repressive environment in respect to that thing, and then when finally they might become a bit more enlightened and lift their bannings, the pendulum swings the other way. A classic was homosexuality, which of course was I can't remember the US position, but I know in New Zealand it was banned. It was illegal, I should say, till sometime in the 80s, I think. And I can remember as a kid growing up in the 70s, there was a very high-profile radio host in my town that then got prosecuted because he was caught. I don't know, God knows how. I can't remember the details, but I just remember as a kid sort of thinking, well, this doesn't seem right. This guy's been prosecuted for this, and it was a big deal, front page of the newspaper every day as this trial went on. And of course, we look at that as just a complete madness. This is an act a consensual act between adults, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the state. Now, finally, they repealed the legislation. God knows how long it had been there. It might have been there 100 years. They repealed the legislation, and then the pendulum swings wildly the other way, where everyone's sort of probably feeling guilty for having the legislation there in the first place, and then homosexuality or gays are given some exalted position in our society, which is equally as mad as the repression that went on. So, so the drug thing is inevitably going to be handled the same way. But yeah, so you're going to see that, aren't you, in towns and cities across the US, that
It's a
problem arising. Uh, and again, of course, because we don't have private property rights around our streets, that people are going to start camping out and huge encampments are going to arise and all the other issues that are going to be related to that. And then there's going to be a huge pandering to the victims, that are wandering around in the streets. So we are going to see that, and that's part of the price we pay, Adam, for the fact that governments have interfered in these areas of our lives for so long.
exactly, and it makes you wonder where is the starting and stopping point based on the pendulum swing, because if you look at New Zealand, as you just shared as an example, being where it was in the 70s, and now we're at a point where if you don't accept that way of thinking, then you are prosecuted for not accepting someone else's way of thinking.
Exactly.
It's a complete opposite, right? So
Yeah.
I guess I'm just wondering where is the where is the sweet spot?
I know that. Well, I have a very simple view of it all, but it's largely unpalatable, unfortunately, and it's unpalatable because it really puts the smelling salts under your nose at how what we're dealing with is a major issue, and the length of time it might eventually take till we have something of a civilized and sane society. And and that is that, philosophy matters. Philosophy is the key. Ideas are the key here. Ideas are the problem, and ideas are the solution. Philosophy is the problem, and philosophy is the solution. And which is why I'm very enthusiastic about what we're doing here, Adam, in terms of ANCAP Radio, and why it should be. Why it needs to be a long-term venture.
I'd like to actually, if you don't mind, Dave, I would like to go a little deeper on your history and your background too, because you're someone who's obviously struck me as very sound in this philosophy, and I often look to for leadership. And if I want to get better at understanding the ANCAP way of life, like there's a few other people that I would turn to besides you. But you did some things with radio, I think, in the 90s. You also wrote a book that I believe did pretty well, and I think a lot of our audience probably don't know that about you, and I think it's really important for context. So could you talk about like some of your ANCAP history?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, it starts with my philosophic influences, and I was very fortunate when I was reasonably young to have contact with someone who was able to influence me considerably philosophically at a political and indeed probably more importantly at a metaphysical level, and that started shaping my my philosophic platform, if you like, or thoughts. And of course, I read an awful lot and as much as I could. Obviously starting with free markets and the importance of those. But probably the philosopher that I read subsequently that influenced me the most would have to be Ayn Rand, because Ayn Rand got me to realize that that this is a moral dilemma. This is a moral problem. This is a moral war that we're engaged with. And and what I realized then is that this is a long, long journey to put things right, notwithstanding that I stood there in 1989 cheering wildly as the Berlin Wall came down and the collapse of the Soviet Union, and thought that, there you go, we're done, it's all over. and if someone had sat me down and said, look, mate, in 30 years' time, you're going to have and describe what we're facing today, I would have rolled around the floor just explaining to them that they were a fabulist and this was just some wild science fiction notion, and so what I then decided to do is live my life as closely as I could to my ideals and my values. Now, in a collectivist society, Adam, that does cause the odd issue, I can tell you. And so I have constantly, and including right today, been in various significant, I might add, wars with the state. I published a couple of magazines, or was involved with the publication of a couple of magazines. The first one was a delightful one based out of Australia, for Australia and New Zealand, called The Optimist, with some friends in Sydney. We published that in the 80s, and then I was involved in publishing one in New Zealand in the early 90s called The Free Radical, which both did very well. Published a newspaper in the 80s in my hometown, which was a Sunday newspaper that we delivered free to every home in the city. And then in the mid-90s, I started a radio station.
Actually, you know what? I have to stop you right there, because you said you delivered it free to every home.
Yeah.
And that type of business approach, typically, spreading goodwill like that and not expecting anything in return, turns into something special. So did anything come from that?
Well, I mean, I got a beat up from the state. We were obviously reliant on advertisers, we'll call it, because a delightful term, the legacy media in our town ganged up and told any substantial advertisers, if they were advertising with us, they would lose all their discounts with them. They put a lot of pressure on it. It's not easy to get a newspaper printed. At that time it wasn't, because it involved a huge amount of prep work and then getting it printed. We had a solid printer, and then they came under pressure and they canned our contract, and we then had to literally overnight find a new one. No, there was a mountain of difficulties, Adam, but we had we, along the way, made sure we enjoyed it. We had a lot of fun doing it. We ran some great stories, and we promoted. I promoted these values, which is part of holding those values. You've got to have an aspiration to disseminate and promote them. So that happened, and it lasted about a year, I think, before I ran out of money. But I was a very young man, so I can be forgiven for that. We then had We had a radio station we set up in the 90s. I've set up in the mid-90s. It was all on AM back then. You had to have huge transmitters. You had to have backup generators. You had to have studios. And worse still, you had to buy your frequencies from the state because, of course, you may have missed this, Adam, but the state owned the airwaves. And once having sold them, they want to control everything that goes out on them as well. So anyway, again, we got underway. We had studios in 3 cities. We were broadcasting in 4 cities. We had a full crew of presenters, and again, we had a huge amount of fun running that radio station. But again, ridiculously expensive to operate. Advertisers were few and far between for the same reason. Everyone was coming under pressure. But we delivered a real Class A product, and we actually had some significant political impacts through that time. So that was fun. But then, as we observed, as I suggested earlier with the paper, the state started beating me up. I think 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, I just can't remember exactly, Adam, after we launched the station, I had my house raided by police with a search warrant that was initiated by our tax department, the Inland Revenue Department, and my place searched. It's a pretty intimidating thing to realize that. And the tax department then started a huge war against me over ultimately claiming that I owed them $1 million, which the opposite was true. They owed me $60,000. And I decided to hunker down. It caused me huge financial grief. We kept this radio stations going for, 18 months, something like that, before in the end we were forced to slowly close them down and sell off the frequencies. And then I ended up in this massive battle with the tax department where I just didn't give up and was determined to beat the crap out of them, and won. And I wrote a book about that. The book's called Be Very Afraid. And then that was the end of the 90s. And then a production company in the 2000s, a movie production company called South Pacific Pictures, came along and acquired the rights to the book and made a movie out of it, which is called We're Here to Help, which is a hoot. And I think that recently they obtained distribution rights in the U.S. They finally organized distribution rights in the U.S. years after it was released in New Zealand. And it got entered into the Anthem Film Festival, if anyone knows that, which was part of Freedom Fest that was held this year. 6 weeks ago, I think, Adam. And it won the award there for Best Feature Narrative. So out of, I think, 150 movies that were originally entered in there. So that's something. Anyway,
Adam, I'm looking for a link to your book. I'm going to drop it here below in a moment. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I'm just saying, I think, that's the best part of that story, of course. The part I'm most proud of, Adam, is that the tax department bankrupted me through that journey, and everyone was punching the air that they had got the radio station off air. They had bankrupted me. And then after that, you go through a period of 3 years of bankruptcy, and coming out of that, I got back on my feet, worked very hard, and very proudly doing what I do, which is property development and so forth. I came along and bought the tax department building in the city I live in, which housed 500 tax department employees. And with great pride, Adam, I renamed the building Henderson House. How cool is that?
That's great.
So for several years, all these miserable fucks who had beaten me up and had taken great pride and thinking they had destroyed me had to go to work to Henderson House. So that was just hilarious. But of course, as you know, as I suggested, these things don't endear you to the state, and the state doesn't quite get the humor or significance of all of that. So I had thought rather naively that would be the end of the story, and no one would ever touch me again. But if maybe it serves as some sort of warning, but they all redouble their efforts and they come after you even harder. And every bureaucrat you deal with thinks, right, I'm going to be the guy that puts this prick's head on a pike and wanders around town with it. I'm going to show him, So, but anyway, in a way, that's part of the story of trying to live an ANCAP existence in a collectivist world. So, there we go.
Wow. Yeah. I didn't know the majority of that. So I think it helps paint a more clear picture for the direction we want to go with ANCAP Radio. And
yeah, you bet.
And listening on the replay. Again, if you're just tuning in or on the replay, go ahead and hit the retweet, the like button, follow ANCAP Radio, follow Dave, New Zealand's Most Wanted. We hope you guys like this story. Do you want to start with us, Dave? Well, you want to talk about, what have you enjoyed about ANCAP Radio? What would you like to see more of?
Absolutely, and this is what we need to drill into. I mean, the purpose of it, and it came about my dear friend Doug Casey, who I'm sure our listeners know very well, and of course Doug lived in New Zealand with his wife Archer for many years, or spent a good deal of time here, and I was fortunate enough to spend time with them through that period, through the period they were here, and we've often talked about different initiatives and different things, and if you love these values and you want to live these values, then a natural thing arises in you that you want to disseminate these values. And I think that's critically important. You want to share them with others, but this is a long journey sharing them with others, trying to get people to embrace these ideas one person at a time. And so Doug and I had been talking for some time about trying to do a radio station of some sort. And with new technology, which you and I are enjoying literally right now as we have this discussion, it is so much easier than anything I was doing in the 90s. And so it just seemed like an obvious thing to try and put together some form of platform that we could not only disseminate these ideas, but we could in real time discuss them, discuss the ideas and the events of the day, and relate them to the ideas, to the values of anarcho-capitalism, and interact with an audience, interact with callers. So that was the fundamental principle behind it, Adam. Was to do that. One thing I did experience with my radio station, we built up a reasonable audience, but it wasn't a massive audience. It was never going to be, nor will the audience on ANCAP Radio be a massive audience. but it should be a decent audience. But the thing that I only appreciated sometime after we had closed down that radio station, Radio Liberty, was the most advantageous thing for listeners. The main thing that that they got. People would say to me, "Oh, you're preaching to the converted," and all of that, and that was true. You had to have some interest in these ideas or this philosophy to have tuned into that radio station. But with the hosts we had and the guests we had, what it did is it helped people fine-tune their philosophy. It also encouraged them to live their philosophy, because all of a sudden they were interacting with others who were actually living the philosophy, living those ideas. And we also championed people who were pushing back on the state, and were giving the state a run for their money with whatever issue they were having with the state. And that gives people agreement and encouragement. And of course, as we know, agreement is a very, very powerful force. And so, again, with ANCAP Radio, the notion was that if people have a place they can repair to where they can hear these things being discussed, they can hear about people having issues and problems and how they dealt with them, how they confronted the state, how they managed to get through their ordeal, then that encourages and emboldens people. So there's the basis for this station, Adam.
I love it. And I think the biggest thing that stands out to me about the success that you had with Radio Liberty in the 80s and 90s, and then what we're building and creating here, is the community piece, the sense of community, knowing that we promote, that knowing that we aren't crazy, right? Because that can happen sometimes when a vaccine comes out and you kind of read between the lines and you say, hey, you know what, like, why should this be forced on me? It's portrayed to you as though you are the one who has lost your mind in those moments. And so being able to come here and build the community, I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited to see where this goes from a community aspect as well. We have some people here who are listening now. Jaffer, good to see you. I like options. I remember you said some good things here along the way. Sandra, a lot of you guys have tuned into the show here as we built and scaled the channel. So, the same question goes to you. Feel free to request a microphone or unmute. Would love to know, to the audience, what have you liked about ANCAP Radio? What do you like? What would you like to see more of? You talked about what you like, Dave. What would you like to see more of?
Well, I enjoy discussing the philosophy and discussing the ideas, discussing the moral relevance of the philosophy, because I think that's so critical. The thing that we should perhaps also just reflect on, Adam, is that we're on Twitter Spaces or X Spaces right now. It's a good start, and it was a way for us to flesh out and test the concept. And we've also been playing around with some capable guys in our group to create an app that would be our dedicated ANCAP Radio app. That would then set the stage, if you like, for us being able to have 24/7 a radio show going that's accessible from anywhere on the planet, and that was populated with a range of hosts and a range of guests covering a broad range of areas here, because ANCAP philosophy just isn't about solely some political issues of the day, though that's critical. But there's a whole bunch of other areas that can be meaningfully fleshed out, and including the entrepreneurial activity, and including a whole lot of aesthetic values that can be reflected on. So there is there's a massive area here that can properly be covered within the within the realm of what we're calling, anarcho-capitalist philosophy. So, I mean, the app's got to be an important thing for people to discuss, whether, that is something that they would be comfortable with, find as a better means of entering this space. And again, what do people who are listening want to hear about? How do they want to interact? What do they see as valuable? And whether this thing has life and legs.
Right, and we've spoken about this offline, but I'm definitely optimistic about the creation of the ANCAP Radio app or whatever it is that we're going to call it. Do you happen to know from a time how long do you think it would take us to have that ready to go?
It might take a couple of months, from what I understand, for that ready to go. We can, of course, expand on Twitter Spaces. I have to say, I mean, Musk is a very, very clearly an immensely clever guy. But I'm fascinated how he dumped that Twitter brand. It's a powerful brand, and X is a wildly uncomfortable brand. But maybe it's a generational thing, and maybe I'm missing out. But anyway, I'm going to keep calling it Twitter Space.
Yeah, and you cut out there for a moment, Dave. But yeah, and it could be me, actually. I don't know if it's my internet, but the branding thing.
As we've experienced, haven't we, Adam, that a number of our potential guests have been so socially media averse that they don't have Twitter and they don't want to get Twitter, which also might be a generational thing, but there might be some sound sense in it, and it is a problem with the idiosyncrasies of we'll call them ANCAP folk, is that they do want to distance themselves from things like the social media tools. So that's another issue. But the virtue or potential of an app ultimately is that it does create sovereignty, and we're all for sovereignty.
Right, and I think that's the biggest disconnect that we could potentially be facing, is there are a lot of individuals who are very firmly planted in, we'll just call it the ANCAP philosophy, who to that point, to that reason, that's why they are not on Twitter. That's why they're not on Instagram. That's why they're not on Facebook. When you go to do a Twitter space, you have to sign in on your phone. You have to tell Twitter your birthday, whether or not you want to give them your real birthday. You have to give them your phone number for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so, privacy being one of the most important things, it's almost counterintuitive to most ANCAPs to have to get on Twitter Spaces in order to spread the philosophy. So that is,
yeah.
I agree with you. That's one thing with the app that I'm looking forward to, is we know some of the people who are ready to go on this platform that have just basically placed a firm no on Twitter, and we respect that. And it's a teaser to everyone here. Once the app is ready, there are some pretty solid ANCAP, we'll say, voices and minds that are coming your way soon. So just another reason, if you haven't gotten on the email update list, there is the link down below. You can just click on that and drop your name and your email. We're not asking for your phone number. We're not asking for your street address, right? Keep your privacy, but it's all down there below.
Yeah. Well, Twitter is the only social media platform that I've downloaded, and the only reason I downloaded it was as part of our initiatives on this show. So, and if we had our own app, I would be dumping Twitter. I find it a tad frustrating to wake up in the morning now with a whole bunch of messages sitting there. I'm not probably running it. Do have an ANCAP friend who is very enthusiastic about Twitter and has managed to identify a few Twitter content folk who he follows and enjoys immensely. So I don't doubt that there's huge potential with it. And from an ANCAP perspective, people using it, I can understand why, is what I mean to say. But there's just something frustrating about it, that it's pervasive in a way. So.
And so next week we have a guest that I know you personally are highly anticipating. It's a guy who goes by the name Dominic Frisby. Are you able to hear me right now?
Yeah,
Dave. Okay. But yeah, so Dominic Frisby is our guest next week. I know you like his song "I'm a White Man and I'm Sorry." Do you have any other things about Frisby's appearance that you'd like to tease out for our audience? And I've got Dave on video here, so I think he's showing to me. Okay, so we're disconnected on audio at the moment. Is that right? I can hear you right now, Dave. I can hear something. Okay, well, we're gonna drop a link down below to Dominic Frisby's song "I'm a White Man and I'm Sorry." It's pretty funny, and he's gonna be our guest next week. If you haven't heard of Dominic Frisby, highly recommend tuning in next week. Now, I also want to encourage all tuned in, if you have not posted a question, or you did have any for Dave or myself as we get ready to take ANCAP Radio to the next level, now is a perfect time to, oh, there we go, Dave's got it fixed now. Now is a perfect time to do so. Post a question or a comment. We're going to be winding this one down in about 10 minutes. So did you hear what I was saying there, Dave? I see you're back on now.
Technical problems, so I apologize for that. I couldn't hear you just for a couple of minutes. You talk about Dominic.
Right, so he's our guest next week, and I figured you could set the table well for his arrival.
Oh, no, he's a superstar. He is a stand-up comedian, and if no one's heard of him, go and Google him. It's Frisby, Frisby, Dominic Frisby. He's a POM. He is a stand-up comedian, and he's a financial commentator. He's written a great book on the history of taxation, which I've just ordered, actually. I haven't read it. I've managed to read excerpts from it, but it's a great analysis of the history and damage that taxation has wrought on the planet. And he's written a book on Bitcoin. He's regularly featured as a speaker talking about gold and precious metals. But the best part of him is, philosophically, he is hardcore. He's one of us, and he does these delightful, immensely amusing little songs, hasn't he, Adam? And of course, the couple of the picks. One is "Show Me the Way to Ancapistan," which is fantastic, and another one was that I've enjoyed immensely is "I'm a White Man and I'm Sorry," which is apologizing for all the havoc that white men have wrought on the planet. Anyway, he'll be a great guest. So everyone must tune in and listen to that.
Yeah, he'll be with us next week. If you guys take a look at the thread here, I just dropped some links there for Dominic. Make sure you follow him as well, if you haven't heard of him before. He's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to picking his brain next week, Dave. So
yeah,
I want to recap everything we touched on here today. Sounds like the app is one thing we're looking forward to, the continued growing and building of the ANCAP radio community. Is there anything else that stands out from the conversation that you want to leave with the audience and just make sure that
Adam, the other thing, of course, is we have set up a web page, and we're going to develop that extensively. And the idea with that web page, again, is to be a central repository for anyone who produces any sensible, properly aligned, well-produced ANCAP material, and so hopefully we can feature on there a number of podcasts, papers that people produce, any audio files of value that people produce. Anything that is meaningful, properly produced, and properly aligned with our philosophy, can go on there. And
I think I'd like to let the audience know that too. If you have any recommendations or people that you follow that are aligned with the ANCAP philosophy, and you think they should maybe be featured on the show or featured on ancapradio.com, you can send an email to ancapradio@gmail.com. You can also just direct message us here on Twitter. Yeah, sorry, Dave, didn't mean to cut you off, but you just helped me realize that could be another good way to source some interesting people.
You bet. No, that's appropriate, Adam. Thank you. That people do interact in that way, and then you have this website, and hopefully in the fullness of time it can become the place to go to, where anyone who has a little flicker of candle burning for these ideas, some interest in these ideas, that they can come along and start to explore it more fully, or people who are sophisticated in terms of their understanding of the philosophy can engage and can also find fellow travelers, which is always a delight and of great encouragement.
100%. And we're getting ready to wind it down here. I did see Doug has been able to join us. So, Doug, I did just send you a request to speak if you did want to hop up here. Otherwise, Dave and I are going to rock out for a few more minutes, and then we'll be winding down today's space. So just a reminder, if you're just tuning in, go ahead and hit the like button, the retweet button, get this out there. If you're on the replay as well, do the same there. It'd be greatly appreciated. We're just today focusing on what is the future and what does the future of ANCAP Radio look like. And a lot of that starts with you, the listener. And I see, there we go. I Like Options is calling in. So I'm going to go ahead and bring you up here. I Like Options. And I see Doug is going to be joining us soon too. So one moment. I Like Options. Let us know where you're calling in from. What have you enjoyed about ANCAP Radio, and what would you like to see more of?
Yeah, I'm just kind of listening to the whole thing, and I'm in Copenhagen at the moment. I was just going to follow up on my last comments from Prague. Last time, I'm still subscribing to about 90% of what you guys are subscribing to, but I'm kind of more living under the radar, I suppose. But I recently connected with a good community in Prague, and then one of the guys said that they have the right shade of gray, basically. Seems to be a lot of like-minded individuals. You can get around the system as long as you don't tread on other people. You can basically run things the way you want it. We found doctors that'll do, any prescription you want without seeing you. They used to do, the fake COVID certificates. They do just everything. It's just, you don't have to pay for it. You just make good friends with these people. And it seems to be, you seem to be left alone, and that has stood so far since we've been there in terms of government. So that seems to be for Europe the best shade of gray we've found, and lots of like-minded people in there, somewhere between 30s, 40s, and 50s, that are just helping each other out without wanting anything in return. So just a little follow-up on what I talked about last time, basically, of all the countries.
Sure. Yeah, isn't that delightful? And
it's easy life there.
One of the things I always take comfort in is the fact that the entrepreneurial mind is actually always more capable and more ahead of the bureaucratic mind.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic to see problems arise, and the creativity of a few free spirits emerge to come up with some, we'll call them some underground, if you like, or black market solutions. That's always very, very inspiring and delightful, and needs to be encouraged, because any resistance to mad state initiatives is absolutely to be applauded and encouraged.
It was just more the people. They basically mentioned some people built their businesses during COVID and they didn't close as they were supposed to. Other people kept, bars and nightclubs open. They were supposed to get fines, but they never got any fines. So the police seems to be, as long as you're not, stepping on anyone, they kind of don't really enforce too much.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
maybe that's one
right.
thing, Dave, as we continue to scale. I think you used the phrase championing or rewarding or acknowledging people around the world who are publicly standing up to the state.
Yeah. No, that is critical because, for some people it's a lonely moment or a lonely journey, isn't it? Because they they think that they're alone in their peril or their issue or the problem they're having, but they're certainly not, and that's another reason for this radio station is to be able to support those people, encourage those people, and if they are genuinely and philosophically resisting the state in some way, then they need all the support they can get.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Dave. But even though there are little bright spots that come up from time to time, I'm just forced to see that the trend towards a bigger and uglier and more powerful state is building momentum still everywhere.
Yeah.
Like when we were talking we were on a Zoom call the other day, there were a number of Europeans on it, and they mentioned that the EU has or is in process of laying down severe penalties for people that engage in misinformation, which is actually insane because misinformation, if it's just a matter of opinion. I think A instead of B, but they're doing this. And, the average sheep out there feels he's being protected by the authorities that know better. So I'm afraid that psychologically, the bad guys have increasing control. I don't know when to change it. I don't know when things are going to turn around, if they do.
Yeah. No, Doug, I'm with you. They are largely in the ascendancy, and we were talking about that at the outset. That my personal view is that the march to dystopia is well underway, but it's not a straight line. There's the occasional sort of stop or a bench seat on the way where we stop and pause for a moment, or we might go back a wee bit. But it is a march towards dystopia and the ascendancy of the state, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course, they get all of the new technologies and the new tools first. I mean, eventually, like, I guess to start with, gunpowder, perfect example. The bad guys got it first. But then when it was democratized, and I hate to use the word democracy because it's become such a corrupt concept that it's actually democracy has become our enemy, not our friend. But after gunpowder became democratized, it allowed for the overthrow of the feudal system with knocking down the walls on castles and taking armored knights off of their horses, which really couldn't be effectively done before. So I guess that's going to happen with AI and all this type of thing. But I think we're headed into a pretty dark time for the next 10 years anyway.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm with you. But I mean, when you say for the next 10 years, you see some bright light beyond that?
Yeah, I do. I'm a believer in Ray Kurzweil's concept of the singularity, which will change the whole nature of life permanently and unrecognizably. And I'm all for it. But in between now and the singularity, which Carswell thinks is in between 10 and 20 years away, we've got things like the Great Reset, where these sociopaths that show up in Davos all the time at the World Economic Forum have all kinds of unbelievable things in store for us plebs.
Yeah.
Doug,
but isn't
just a quick question, Doug. Sorry to interrupt. So, a singularity. So, I'm sure you're aware of Fourth Turning and Neil Howe's work and recent book on that.
Yes.
Do you feel like you've experienced that yourself, because you're older than probably most of us here?
Yes, I think it's an accurate way of looking at history. Of course, there's lots of ways of looking at it, but yes, I can see that cyclicality, and it's more sophisticated than just simple cyclicality. So yeah.
Yeah, but you feel like we could be where he thinks we are, roughly speaking, like somewhere in the middle of the fourth turning, basically.
Yeah, it's already started.
Yeah. Okay.
And I mean, what's some of the handwriting on the wall? It's like before World War II, there were a few inklings, a few warnings, like the Spanish Civil War was the biggest one, of course, and maybe the war in the Ukraine is analogous to that. But I'm afraid these sociopaths in Washington are going to keep plumping for regime change in Russia. And it's not just that they're bad, or it's not just that they're crazy. I really think they are, but they really believe that they're righteous. They really believe that they're on the good side of a battle against good against evil. And at this point, the Washington, D.C. is the greatest danger in the world today, I think. And the Jacobins that are in charge of it.
And they live in their own little bubble.
Yeah.
They do live in a bubble, and they talk just to each other. Everybody they talk to, big or little, in and around the Washington Beltway, they all slop at the same trough of the state. And yeah, it's a self-reinforcing thing. I don't know what's to be done about it, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean,
you have to get out of it to have your eyes open. Basically, my wife was born in Russia, but she used to work for CIA. So she's no longer Russian citizen. She's American citizen, because you cannot be cleared for top secret when you're Russian. And since
was she what the CIA calls an asset?
They tried to recruit her for that, but she was in cybersecurity, basically. But because she has a language background, she speaks many languages. She was a good potential asset, but she saw the writing on the wall. It was going to be a pretty lonely life. So instead, she ran into me on a tax-free island in the Caribbean, and then we basically went on a long world tour, and her perspective on the world changed quite a lot. So now she sees the bubble that she came from, which was DC, basically. So you have to get out of it.
So what's her opinion on how these things are, since she's, I guess, lived in Mordor for a while, which I did too, of course.
Yeah.
But what's her opinion on what's going to happen? Does she have one?
She's not really super interested, but she does say like Russia is very corrupt. But so is the West. It's just more visible in Russia. It's basically extremely corrupt, and that's just always how it was, right? If you build a good business, government will come and take it from you one way or another. Or they'll either send some regulatory agency after you, or find some way to basically blackmail you. So it's ultra corrupt. She doesn't have anything positive to say, really, except the way family life works, and people in the lower brackets of society, they're very good with kids. They're very good with family-wise and keeping together and helping each other, which is lacking over here in the Western world, where we just send old people to old people's homes and kids to schools and after-school activities, etc. So they have much better cohesion, I suppose, in the lower ends of society, but the top is super corrupt.
Yes, it's nice actually that the Russians are more traditional in the human sense of the word.
Yeah.
Because that's why Trump is popular among certain people, among half of the U.S. anyway.
Yeah.
it's because he believes in traditional values. He's no libertarian, that's for sure. But he believes in traditional values, which, really are nice. I mean, I'm not in any way religious, but it's kind of nice when, people go to church on Sundays and listen to the preachers say, mostly acceptable things, some good things, and get to meet their neighbors face to face as opposed to just on a screen. But that's not the way the wokesters feel.
Yeah, it's just a bit more sane, really. I'm not religious at all. I don't believe in any religion at all, but at least most of the people are largely more sane or more balanced than just all the crazy woke garbage from the West.
And that is the nice thing about the Russians, is that that stuff just doesn't fly in Russia. They're actually reasonable from that point of view.
Yeah, and we meet lots of Russians and lots of Ukrainians in Prague, and they get along. They don't really have, like, the average person. They don't. There's no hatred. There's no nothing. There's just like meeting someone from Uzbekistan, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the real enemy here is the state and the kind of people that populate the state.
Yeah. So
Whichever state, whichever.
So for more content on this NCAP, I think it would be good to have some practical advice, not what I provided, but similar, where people have, found places where they can have a little bit of, not exactly NCAP life, but at least under the radar NCAP life, maybe.
Well, of course, you're probably familiar, being in Prague, with Vít Jalajka, who's set up Liberland in the Danube River, right?
I just saw it recently. I haven't been there, though.
Well, he appears to be making some progress towards that. The Croatians have kind of semi-recognized his little island, which I think is 7 square kilometers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, I mean, there are a few good things happening in Europe, but I'm afraid it could all get washed away as things get out of control. Just like here in the U.S., they say, I think correctly, that there are about 2 million people that come across the Rio Grande every year. And they're from all over the world. They're not just from Mexico, not just from Central America, but they're from Africa and Asia and everywhere. And they're generally young unmarried males, which is really a strange phenomenon. And you've probably seen the news items about these people being put up in hotels, not just in New York City, but then they're shipped out to smaller cities and put up in hotels, and others are staying in tents. But they're still coming in at the rate of 2 million per year. They have no income, they have no skills, and I'm wondering what they're going to do with them. I think it's going to get worse in Europe, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because if I was a young Nigerian, the first thing I'd try to do is get across the Mediterranean to Europe.
Yeah. And many do. I suppose Italy and France, and subsequently UK takes the brunt of it. We don't see too many of them in the Eastern Europe, even when we lived in Budapest. Didn't see any, but we lived in France as well last couple of years. We stayed there for a few years, and outside of the small villages, yeah, you see a lot of them, and then they have a army of problems down there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to solve it, because as the economy in Western Europe and the U.S. Degenerates and perhaps goes into complete collapse, I think soon, but don't trust me because I'm a perma bear. Aid to Africa will stop, and the people are going to naturally migrate to Europe, where there's all kinds of free things that are offered to them. So I think it could get pretty wild and woolly.
And now that you see all the colonial power, I mean, supposedly France is losing grip on many of those African nations, so that could become just a whole bunch of Somalias, basically.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it.
Good stuff. So we were getting ready to wind it down. I do have to go here shortly. Dave and Doug, I don't know how you guys are feeling energy-wise. If you want, we can keep the space going for a bit. But really, I think the focus here, Doug, and would like to hear your thoughts as well, as far as what you've enjoyed about ANCAP Radio, what you would like to see more of as someone who's kind of helping fuel this ship. What comes to mind for you on those topics?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how we can broaden our listener base so we can exchange more boots on the ground knowledge from people that are in different parts of the world that are actually seeing things and hearing things that we don't get on electronic media. Because frankly, I mean, I've traveled to 150 plus countries, most of them a number of times. But when I'm not there, I have to rely on unreliable sources for what's going on. So that's why I'd like to broaden the base so we can have an exchange of knowledge from people that are seeing things firsthand. Now, my question is how we get from here to there. I think that's the big question. And maybe it's answered by providing content, good content. I'm not exactly sure how to do it. Like Matt Smith and I have a weekly or bi-weekly, twice, by that I mean twice a week, sometimes podcast. And the question is coming up with new and valuable things to say, as opposed to just opinions. Everybody's got an opinion. So I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure how to do that. In other words, I need some help from the audience.
I like that a lot. And we just posted down below, if you guys can see, you can send in any ideas, recommendations for topics, guests, really whatever comes to mind for you. On the note of what Doug just shared, you shoot an email over to ancapradio@gmail.com. Be sure to get on the updates list as well if you haven't subscribed to it. That's all down below in the thread. Dave, did you have anything on what Doug was saying?
No, that's a valuable part of what we're aspiring to do is to get that real time input from people who understand the real cause point for a lot of the events that are going on in their particular part of the world. That can be immensely valuable, and I don't doubt that with the right support, those are going to start appearing in our world. But the other thing Doug's absolutely right on is just how we get this message out there that we exist, what our intent and purposes are, and get people more connected and more involved.
Maybe the best way, frankly, is like, I guess right now we've got 30 or 40 people that are on the call with us, which is a trivial number. But,
sure.
There used to be on television in the U.S. a Clairol commercial. That's a hair shampoo. And it was a cute it was a cute ad they used to run for years. So one girl tells another, and it showed the pictures of the girl doubling and quadrupling and so forth. And this ought to be like that. So if you have friends that are liberty oriented or want to hear more or ask questions or submit interesting facts, invite them to come to the call next whenever, and that's how we can grow the audience and get to know each other. And because if we don't hang together, we'll surely hang separately.
There you go. Well done.
Well, we'll be back here next week with the legend that is Dominic Frisby. There are links below to check out some of his stuff, his Twitter, Dave's favorite video by him, I'm a White Man and I'm Sorry. Definitely check that one out if you haven't already. It's pretty funny.
That sounds funny.
Yeah.
and we'll be back here next Thursday at 3 p.m. As we continue to grow the channel. There will be more times throughout the course of the week that we go live aside from that time, so stay tuned for that. The best way to get all of those updates is by subscribing to the ANCAP radio list. And again, just want to hammer this home one more time to Doug and Dave's point. If you have any recommendations, topics, guest speakers, ideas that's really the heartbeat of ANCAP Radio, is the ANCAP people, you guys here tuned in. So, don't be shy and don't hesitate to send an email to ancapradio@gmail.com with your recommendations.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah,
Super.
and indeed, if you think you've got a story to tell yourself, or you've got some particular angle that deserves or warrants further dissemination, then bring that along as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you, Doug, for hopping on here. We did. It looked like you were about to say something there for a moment, Doug. Do you have any parting words?
I was just going to say thanks, Adam, and see you next week.
Yeah.
Sounds
No,
good.
thank you, Adam.
Thank you guys both. Looking forward to it. All right. And Jaffer, I know
Okay.
you had your hand raised, my man. We're gonna catch you next week. We're winding with this one down, but I appreciate your listenership. I know you're always here, always have good things. So really looking forward to seeing you next week and beyond. Jaffer, guys, go give him a follow. He's a great follower, listener, and fan here. So this has been ANCAP Radio for this week. We'll see you guys at the same time next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Take care.
Thank you.